Hey guys, thank you for joining me on a new video on this channel. In this video it's going to be all about landscapes. It's not going to be a mega long high detail tutorial on landscapes. There's much better ways to create a landscape which you will find on this channel eventually down the road. The more I create, it's more easier conventional ways to create higher detailed landscapes. But I thought I'd just do a video just on the beginner side of getting started with landscapes. So if you've used landscapes in the past, this is more aimed at people who haven't. But yeah, if you've used landscapes in the past and you know how to get started with them, then don't hesitate to subscribe and wait for a video in which I go more detailed into creating a landscape as a whole. Following on from the last video where we did a basic scene setup with environment lighting and certain aspects there, that video is available. I forget the name of it. Oh yeah, it's a scene setup video. The card's at the top right now. If you want to go back and watch that so you're at the same stage that I'm at now, then feel free to. But at the end of that video I did create this room I would use to test materials and certain objects, lighting and things like that, and how it affects the scene. It's always good to have a little room like this in which you can save bookmarks, cameras. Just quickly move through them with the number keys. As you can see, I've set some up here. To set up a bookmark like this, I went through this on my Getting Started series on how to do this. So you basically would move just your camera like this to whichever position you want. Hold left control and press the number in which you want to set that bookmark to. So I'm going to press 1 for there. So if I go to number 2, this is what I've previously set. Press number 1, that's where I was before. Number 2 is there and number 3 is there. So you just basically move your camera to wherever you want it and hold left control and press a number on your keyboard and set it up. Okay, so yeah, this is about landscapes. So where will we find landscapes? At the top left here. So if you go into the select mode and just go down to landscape, so you can press shift 2 on your keyboard, you shall see that it creates a big green outline, which is where your landscape will be. And I'm just going to go through this quite quickly. It's pretty simple stuff. So here it says new landscape in this category. This is where you will create your ratios for your landscape. So here's a create new tab, go over that shortly, but you have an import tab here in which you can import a landscape height map from an outsourced engine like World Machine or Gaia, and you would simply click this button, it will open your folder, go to your height map and you can import it here and you'll have that kind of landscape. This is how I do it as a personal thing, and we will go through that on this channel, the upcoming videos. So stay tuned for that. But for this beginner one, we're just going to create a standard one like this. So beneath that, you have enable edit layers. This enables the engine to use different layers on top of this landscape. If you followed the last tutorial where we imported the landmass plugin and the water system plugin, to use them plugins on your landscape you will need to enable edit layers. Below that is a material slot, so if you already have a material for landscapes, you will just simply put that into this slot. I would highly recommend opening the material instance and letting the engine compile the shaders before you add the landscape material here. On this channel, in upcoming videos which are very soon, I will create a landscape material which will be automatic and paint layers, and I'll foliage automatically spawn on them and things like that. But them kind of videos are coming up on this channel, so please subscribe and you'll get them videos in the near future. So below that we have layers, 0 array elements. This is pretty advanced. You'll see this in upcoming videos. Below that you have your standard location, rotation and scale. It's pretty normal. Under that you have the section size, which is 63 by 63. So the sections are the little dark green squares that you see here. And then you have a section by components, which is the bigger square covered in this lighter green wire. And then below that you have number of components, which is 8 by 8. So the components are the bigger squares, so you have 8 across and 8 down. Very simple. You can click the drop down menu and change how many quads, how many sections you want. So 2 by 2 is these 2 sections by 2 sections in one side, inside one component. But we're just going to leave them at default for now. Sorry, I muddled my words up then. At the bottom there you have overall resolution. At the minute it's set to 505, which is just a default. You can change this here, like 2049, 217, sorry, 2017, and that will make a 2K map. But as you can see, it increases the size of your landscape as well for a higher overall resolution, but this doesn't have to happen. We can change the actual resolution of the landscape without increasing the size, but we will do that shortly when we've created the actual landscape. But from there, it's not letting me set default, so I'm just going to put 8 by 8, which is just default now. So that's just a basic view of that. So we're going to click create and create the landscape. At this point you may be getting a compiler shaders at the bottom right. I'd recommend leaving that to do so. It shouldn't really take long, but it's dependent on your computer itself. Okay, starting in the sculpting mode. As you can see, we have different sculpting tools at the top. But what I'm going to do before I go through them is just go through this menu on the side, as this menu is pretty much mirrored for each tool. But you'll see that shortly. So starting at the top here you have a brush type. This basically changes the brush type. As you can see, let me change the size of this so you've seen it. This blue circle you've seen down here, let's get a bit closer. Let's go to unlit mode so you can see it. This blue circle you see in here is your brush. To change to unlit mode, sorry, you just click this, or you could select the hotkey, which is Alt and 3. But yeah, we'll leave it on unlit. This is your brush, basically. This is what sculpts things. Drop that down there. Control. This is what sculpts your landscape. Now you can't see it very well in unlit mode. Let's change back to lit mode. You know what a brush is now. This just sculpts your landscape. Pretty simple. Simple part of the brush. Hold left shift down, you can sculpt downwards on your landscape as well. And next to that you have the alpha brush. An alpha brush works off a texture. This is also a part of how I do my landscapes, but you'll see that in future videos when I create a scene. So what this does is it uses a texture and then it bends the geometry of the landscape based on that texture. The white scales are the higher and the black scales are the lower. So if I change the size of this now, the strength, you can see there that texture. You can change this texture by the drop down menu, and you can pretty much choose any texture you want. Doesn't have to be a certain one. Like if I get this brick normal map, you'll see that I'll just use the brick normal map to create the landscape. Or you can use a mask. Like this mask isn't a mask, as you can see there, it's a water mask I've created, which I use for foam. Water tutorials will be coming to this channel as well in the future. So basically this will allow you to paint on the landscape using texture, which is pretty simple. You change the brush size and whatnot. The next one is the pattern brush. It's similar to the alpha brush, but the pattern brush portrays that image across the whole landscape. So when I draw on the landscape and do this, if I was to go over it, the whole landscape like this, you will see that it has the texture there. As you can see, the height, the white is the highest part, which is there, and it's just basically copying that texture over the whole landscape, and you can change your landscape based off a texture. It's quite handy. As you can see, it does an alright job. Don't worry about the shadows you see, we'll cover that shortly. But yeah, that is the pattern brush. You can use, like I say, any texture in there as well. So put this water normal in, and you can just change based off that water normal, which is quite good. So moving on from there, you have the work with entire landscape components. This just basically cuts your components where it said 8x8. It cuts them into bits, and you can just raise and lower sections of your landscape. I've shown you that the possibilities of using it are very slim, but I just thought I'd show you anyway. It's a bit of a weird brush to use. So going back to the start, which is the circular brush, we're going to look at the fall off types. So this fall off types, let's find the flat area. So this will do here. So this fall off type is just a smooth fall off. Let me increase the size. So if I click once, as you can see, it is a smooth fall off. The next fall off is a sharp linear. Put this next to it, you can pair it. This one is more of a sharp fall off compared to that curved one, as you can see here from the edging. The next one to that is the spherical fall off, so or as I call the mushroom fall off. Click that to start creating a mushroom like landscape. Like I say, like you would do that, I don't know why. Could be useful actually. Yeah, put a few, oh gosh, put a few together. But next to that you have the sharp to soft fall off. Let's just boom boom boom. As you can see, it's a sharp decline into a curved decline at the bottom. That's basically what that does. It's quite a good fall off that if you want to create like weird canyon shapes. But yeah, that's the brush fall offs. Below that you have the tool strength. As it stands here, you can see I can only scale my strength from 0 to 1, which is the strength in which I can do it. So if I lower this, the sculpt's a bit better, but you can actually click on it and type in. I think it's a maximum of 10. So if I press 15, I'm sure it's a maximum of 10. Yeah, so you can have a strength of 10 if you type it in, which is alright. Just click on it and type it in. Use target values. This is a bit more advanced. It's very rare you'll use it, to be honest. Very rare I use it as well. I'm just going to set these to the default. This is the brush size, so this is your brush you've been using all this time. That's the size, default that. And then you have a brush fall off based on these fall offs. Let me increase the size to show this. The brush fall off is, if you see on the mountain here, watch this bit, you'll see me put that white line on it. That's the edge of your fall off. Right there. If I move this down here, you can see. If I change the fall off now, you'll see that blue spherical bit gets a bit bigger and smaller, depending on where I change it. So if it's big like that and I do it, it just changes like so. Depending on your fall off, we'll just default into. Use clay brush. I'm not really sure what that does. I've never really used it before, so I don't know. But this is just your layers. You can right click, you can change the name, press F2, like anything else you can change the name. So you could like, you know what, base, or it's capitals, base, layer, yeah, and then you could create a new layer. So if you create a new layer, it'll just mirror this layer but add it on top. You won't see any drastic change in your landscape, but it will just mirror it and add it on top. And then you can sculpt again, and if you don't like the sculpts like you've done the second time round, you could just delete that layer whilst keeping this layer safe. So yeah, moving on from there, we're going to go back to the categories at the top. Keep in mind that this menu pretty much stays the same, apart from when you get to your erosion and hydro, but apart from that it's either less or stays the same. So the erase tool just basically flattens the landscape, so everything you've done you can just click it and it'll erase it back to the decent ground level. It can be useful, the erase tool, to be honest, to randomise some sort of landscape up. and you have your settings underneath. So next to that is a smooth tool. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like this hard edge, you can just smooth it down to a bump, like so. Like if you've got all that rugged stuff, you can just smooth it all off with the same parameters. Flatten tool. The flatten tool is similar to the eraser tool. Let's just lower this ring a bit. Brush fall off. Let's change that up a bit to show off this flatten tool. So if you look on the screen now, and I'll zoom it in, you see the cross or the crosshair, whatever you want to call it, little cross thing, plus icon. This basically works off that plus. So if I click where that plus is, it'll flatten out at that level. So if I just do this thing quickly to promote it a bit more. So if I move this cross now, just to see where the curve is at the edge of the circle. If I do it a bit higher, let's make this a bit smaller. So if I do it a bit higher, say here, it'll flatten out on that level, like so. And then I could go up a little bit more and flatten it at that level, and flatten it at a higher level, depending on my mouse cursor now. It's changed from the cross, don't know why, don't ask. And then come back down to this level. This can be an handy tool. It's probably pretty much how I'd start off with a landscape if I was just freehanding a landscape. But yeah, and then you could possibly go over the smooth tool and just go over it a bit gently like that and lightly, just to change all that weird stuff off it. So yeah, and that's the flatten tool. Next to that you have the ramp tool, which is pretty self-explanatory. You have a ramp width and a ramp fall off. I'll show you them shortly. So the bottom of the ramp will be your first click, the top of your ramp will be your second click. You just click at the top and then it will bring this outline. This is just depicting where your landscape will be, your ramp will be. If you have a look, you have a dotted line and a solid line on each side. So your ramp width, you can see it gets wider and thinner, like so. And then the fall off is where it will move the solid line in and out based off your fall off. And then you would simply click add ramp and it adds a nice decent ramp into your landscape. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. I do like the ramp plugin. You can actually move the ramp as well when you're finished, and then just click add ramp and it'll add a new ramp to it. It's quite cool. You can click the bottom bit here, move it over here, click add ramp, and just add these ramps to your scene. Can be useful. I sometimes use this if I want to create like a waterfall. Just put this over here, add ramp, not a waterfall, sorry, like a downstream river, and then you can go back to your sculpt tool and just sculpt it up a bit to whatever you want. Just raise that strength a bit, like so. And then you could make a little water material, like I said before, which I will do on this channel at some point. And then just create a little stream down there, you know, just have a play about. And that's a ramp tool. Then you have erosion. The erosion tool is pretty self-explanatory. It just tries to predict erosion on your landscape based off real world natural elements and all that jazzy stuff. And you can just have a mess about with this tool. It's quite good at times. Sometimes it's just completely useless. It's a good job I don't work for Epic, isn't it? So that's the erosion tool. As you can see down there, like I said earlier, these tools have a few more parameters to play with. I'd recommend just having a little play about with them, you know what I mean? Just have, this one's a good one, the noise mode. You can change whether it either raises and lowers the landscape, or just raises or just lowers. And you have the usual brush sizes, but you have surface thickness and your threshold, which can change the strength and help of it. I don't know. The hydro tool is pretty much the same, but it creates more of a sharper edge fall off thing for the hydro. Putting these together can create some nice geometry on your landscape. But to get better geometry, you'll use the landmass plugin, but that's probably my next video on this channel. From there you have the noise, which is the same as the erosion and hydro. Just play about with that if you can get it to work. Let's put this on like a 5. Might work then. No, it's not really working. Let's do add. There you go, it's adding a bit of noise to your landscape. Like so. Just when you're starting off with landscapes, it's all about just experimenting and having a play about. Yeah. So from there is read topology. I'm not really sure what that does, I've never used it ever. Similar to visibility, I've never really used that. You can probably Google these and find out more. I'll share a link with the actual page for landscapes where it has certain categories on getting started with landscapes. I'll put that in my description. Blueprints is your landmass plugin, where you would use your landmass plugin. But like I say, this is for the next video. You also have a mirror tool, and what the mirror tool does is, so basically we'll copy whatever's on this side of the mirror and portray it on this side. So you can increase the smoothing width, so it's more of a smoother gel together in the middle. And the mirror points, to set that to default. Leave that back out here. As you can see, it's changing it there. And down there you have the operations, so whether you're on an x-axis to x-axis, or you know, -x to +x, +x to -x, -y, and so on. You can rotate it as well. And then you would just simply click apply, and it puts this side on this side. And you can actually create some funky things like this. This is something I probably would work with. I'd get rid of this over on this side and try and do some sort of strange thing with it. But moving on from there, you have the select and the copy tool, so you can just basically copy the landscape and you select it with that and then copy it and then paste it like next to it over here. So I don't know. It's pretty weird. What's that? I think that might be the noise map. But anyway, yeah. So, and that's, well, before we finish, I want to move on to the other tabs. That's basically the sculpture tool, like I said a bit earlier. Just have a play about with it. Just play with the tools and go mad with it and create anything. And if it doesn't look right, you don't like it, delete the landscape, start again. Just keep playing with it until you actually understand more, at a more decent level of what the tools do. But like I say, on this channel we will be in the future using more alpha brushes and plugins. So plugins that have recently been suggested in the community I'm in the Discord, where that link is in the description as well. It's a fellow YouTuber and admin in his Discord, and you will catch me there. But he suggested blueprints, which you can edit the layers with. I've since then purchased the blueprints and they work really nice. But when we get to the point of where we're building an actual scene, I will put them blueprints into view and let everyone see what it is. So yeah, moving on to the paint tab. The paint is a landscape layer painting. We'll go through this more in detail. It's the same as a sculpting, but it's more just texturing, and we'll go through that more in detail when I do the landscape material in a future video. One last thing, well, two more things I want to show you before I quit the video. Is a manage tool. Everything in here is pretty self-explanatory. You can just add new layers and then add new landscapes on top of these layers. Well, this is a little bit more advanced. One thing I will show you is a resize tool. What the resize tool will do, let's smoothen this off a bit. She's kind of doing me head in. Bigger brush. Just default it. Yeah, just smooth this off a bit so you can see me going through this a bit better. So, if I go back to the manage tab, resize, as you can see, like at the top left here, you change it to wireframe mode or Alt 2 on your keyboard. And what this is doing now, it's just showing you the wireframe for the geometry of your landscape. And in the resize tool, as you can see, the geometry is kind of okay, but it's not great, but it's kind of okay. But you can actually change the geometry without affecting the actual size of the landscape. And to do that, you will just, oh, it's already, you'll see it as expand, So this will just expand your landscape out when you change the size. But if you change the resize mode to resample, this will keep the same size of landscape, but increase the geometry or topology, if you like, of the landscape. So the original is 63 by 63. If I change this to 127, and then maybe you could section components, could be 2 by 2. As you can see, it's at 505, the overall resolution, by 505, and it will put it to a 2K by 2K resolution, which will, if you watch the actual geometry, like the lines of the wireframe, when I click apply now, the actual geometry of the landscape changes, which is a bit more higher detail than before, and you've not actually changed the size of your landscape. You've kept it, but now it's in higher detail without changing the size. And you can even go a bit higher than that. I can go 255, click apply, and it'll make it a little bit more denser for a more detailed. There you go, look at that. This is high detail now. I feel like it's about to crash me Unreal, but as you can see now, the grid size of the topology is pretty high and pretty dense. I go to lit mode, and you can see how it's a lot more detailed now. It still looks ugly because it's just a random thing, but it's a lot more high detailed. Go back to wireframe. So yeah, and that's basically how you increase the geometry of your landscape to make it look nicer. It also works if you use any kind of tool for the landscape. Use the tool, and then after you've used the tool, come in here and increase the geometry of the landscape. But I'm going to drop this back down before it actually blows my computer up. Just click apply, like lower the topology. So now we're back at the standard bit. What I'm going to show you, one last thing before I finish the video. Just going to go back to select mode. As you can see, the colour, it's going brighter white to a darker white. So the brighter white down here is more tight topology, and it gets larger the further away from the camera. This is to help with performance, and you can actually change this by clicking on your landscape and just scrolling down to the LOD distribution. As you can see, LOD 0 screen size, you can actually change this. So if I put 0.1, it will increase the density. Geometry will be more visible further away from the camera. So if I put this to default, it'll go back and say I put this to 1. The distance will not be that far, but the closer I get to the landscape, the more higher detail it becomes. So I'm going to set this back to default. As you can see, the pretty big triangles at the minute. So if I set to default, the triangles get smaller, creates higher geometry on your landscape. You also have the LOD 0 amount, so if I set this to 1, it decreases the amount as well. 0.2, decrease, decrease, decrease. Oh no, minimum of 1. Let's try 1.7. There you go, it's getting a bit higher now. 2, 3, 5. As you can see, this is just increasing the LOD quality based on the camera distance. So I'm going to put 1.25 back to normal, and then just increase this to 1. Oh no, wrong way. 0.1, and now I'll get high detailed landscape again. But have a play about with this. I'm going to leave it as default because default works fine. It just eases performance on your computer. But yeah, over this course of this video, we've had a brief overview of the landscape tools and how to edit the landscape to give you more geometry, and just a basic overview of the landscape and how it works and stuff like that. As you've heard me mention throughout the video, I've got a lot of videos planned for this channel, like using the plugins, doing landscape materials, water shaders, fog shaders I've got coming up as well to create volumetric fog in the shaders in your scene. But yeah, I've got loads planned, and I can't wait to share my knowledge with you guys. So hit that subscribe button, that like button, and join me on my new journey on YouTube. So thank you very much, guys. and gals. I'll see you in the next